I learned that I had FAP when I was a senior in high school, so I had gotten a blood test to confirm that I had the gene. And then when it came back that it was positive, I also got a subsequent colonoscopy to make sure that my blood test was accurate. And as I wrote in my book, it was like there was thousands of polyps in my large intestine, and my surgeon said it was time to operate immediately. So 2 weeks after I graduated high school is when I went to go get my large intestine removed, and where I got my J pouch surgery. I have a family history dating back to the 1970s with my history with FAP. So my grandma's mom was the first one who had it, and she had it suddenly. And then after she passed away suddenly from her colon perforating because back then they weren't sure of what it was. And then once they found out it was genetic, my mom or my grandma and her sister were both diagnosed with it. And then my Aunt Ronnie, my grandma's sister, only had one child after, and she didn't have the gene, so it ended there on that side. My grandma had four children. Two of them winded up having it, my mom and my aunt, and then my mom winded up having me and my brother. And I'm currently the last one that has it as of right now. My aunt didn't wind up having any children, so it has ended with me. It could end. So that's kind of where my goal is to have it end with me. Me and my family, we dealt with the diagnosis just through, there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of things that you can't really predict. And there's a lot of things that are going to go wrong and going to be tough. And even if a surgeon breaks it down to you in the medical room, it's always going to be different when you're living through it in person. So I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but how me and my family dealt with that, and I feel the best way to deal with that when you're going through diagnosis of any condition in general is just being really close with each other, spending a lot of time, having that support group with you. It's just really important to be surrounded by people you love and always having love around you, and also just not feeling like you're alone. So I'm lucky. I benefit from my family having a long history with the disease and having three generations of people who have went through surgeries. Obviously, they were different and they varied, but they still all went through it. So I had all these different experiences to learn from. So I guess the best thing to combat the uncertainty and the fears that are associated with diagnosis and moving forward is just to have a really strong support group of people who love you and people who have been there, or at least people who have some experience. So you just don't feel as alone, or at least if they don't have experience, they're with you. And that's the most important thing. I did have prophylactic surgery. So when I was 18 and my blood test came back positive, the polyps were all there, but nothing had grown. Thank God. So I did have prophylactic surgery, and I owe a lot of my quality of life nowadays to that. And it is highly recommended that if you can get it prophylactically, that you should. The only professional support I really had, and by professional I mean like medical professional, was my surgeon, Dr. Gorfine, who was a really great person, great doctor all around. He was honestly the only support I truly needed. He answered all my questions. He still does to this day. I have his email, even though he's not operating anymore. But that was something always back in the day when I did have a lot of questions and I was going through it. I could shoot him an email and he would answer right back, within a day, and that's still true today, all these years later. So I would say having a really good, kind, and understanding surgeon is a huge benefit to have when you're going through any operation of any sort. Certainly very blessed to have Dr. Dorfine in my life. Being realistic with expectations is the most important thing when giving advice or just disclosing any information to a person who just got diagnosed with FAP. It's not sugarcoating anything. I think expectations sometimes can get blurred, at least from what I've read and what I've talked to other FAP patients as well. In my experience, at least, I know for me, I was very lucky and I was debriefed, and I had a very compassionate and informative group of surgeons who really didn't leave anything unturned or any stone unturned really for me. So I think that kind of softened the blow a bit. It's still going to be tough no matter what, but I definitely wouldn't soften the blow, so to speak, and I would give the raw truth. And I guess I wouldn't overindulge either, because if there was one thing that I kind of look back on and it added stress in the moment when I was diagnosed was comparing, because it's different family histories with FAP vary from patients. So I just know my family's history with FAP has certain characteristics that my surgeons logged just for my family. But let's say another family had something different happen in their history with the disease, it'll be logged differently for them. It can be difficult because sometimes, like I just know this from having conversations with other FAP patients where they've gone through things that I've never experienced, no one in my family has ever experienced, and vice versa. So I think it's with genetic conditions that I can't speak for all, but at least with FAP, I've noticed that seems to be a common thing, that it varies based on family history. And with a disease that's already rare as it is, with not enough people talking about it, I feel like sometimes that's a distinction that doesn't get brought up enough. And sometimes, one person's family history with it can be a lot rougher than another person's, and it can give you the wrong idea of what you're about to go through, or vice versa. Someone has an easier history, like maybe my history with FAP is a lot easier. And, someone who reads my story is like, oh, I went through all this and he didn't. Like, that's very possible. And that can paint a different image of what the disease is like. And that's a distinction that doesn't get made enough. So perhaps that's something that can be talked about more. Just to kind of highlight that difference, because I feel like that's something that I really, when I do think about it, that's something that wasn't really brought to my attention. And it is something that is a really big difference among people who have FAP. For example, we have a family friend who had it spontaneously, and that only happens 25% of the time of all the FAP cases. So FAP is super rare as it is. 25% of those super rare cases are spontaneous. So we actually happen to know someone who had that, and their battle with the disease was like, they were asking us questions, and there were some things that we honestly couldn't even answer because it was just foreign to us, and it was really foreign to them because they had absolutely no family history at all. So we were able to help a little bit, but I just think since it's so rare and there's not enough people to reach out to and relate to, and not enough people sharing their stories, that when people finally do find someone who's sharing their story, they're like, oh yes, like they're really eager to cling to it and like relate, just ready to relate to everything. Because that's kind of the case with a lot of diseases, or at least for the most part. And there is overlaps, but sometimes it just doesn't always line up quite the same. And it could be a little disappointing. It can honestly feel like maybe you don't know what you're going through, and it could feel maybe like you're being misled, because I know I wrote about that in my book a little bit. I felt like maybe at times it felt like I was being misled, but the truth is there's just a lot of uncertainty, and I think being honest about that isn't a bad thing. So I think healthcare professionals should embrace a bit of the uncertainty and also stress the genetic differences, and then that also could just tie into healthcare professionals not looking at everything with FAP as like a one size fits all, and kind of basing things on a family case history. I feel like, I mean, that could be the case too. I am pretty young, so I don't know everything, and I don't want to pretend like I know everything, but I feel like when I was diagnosed, that was something that wasn't really stressed much. And even in my conversations with people, it's something that I've kind of noticed a little more than other people have kind of noticed. So just something I've picked up on over the years, I feel like is not touched on enough. I've connected with a few support groups. I'm connected with Fight CRC, Colon Cancer Alliance, and actually I believe that's it for and NORD. Nope, there's three. So I'm affiliated with NORD, Fight CRC, and Colo Cancer Alliance. And yeah, I'm affiliated with their affiliate groups, and I reach out to advocates and do stuff for advocate resources and whatnot. So I've met a lot of good people there over the years, and there's a lot of fun, cool meetups and resources. And support groups are always good just because it's good to have other people who are going through something similar. And it's always good, even if you're in a position where you've recovered, like let's say for me, for example, like I know some people when they get over to the other side of the bridge, they want to just, forget everything that's happened and not really, reflect on the past too much. But it's important to be with support groups, even if you get over things, just so that when someone is going through things, they can look to the person who's, conquered it and be like, oh, I could go to him for help. So that's something that one of the main reasons why I joined the support groups that I did, and I get great enjoyment out of that. The best advice I would give to someone who is just recently diagnosed with FAP is to know that it's going to be tough. Like I said, I don't sugarcoat things. I don't believe that sugarcoating really does a lot of good. But one thing that I can say for certain is it will get better. That's the thing about it. It's tough, but it will get better. And if I can be anything to you, if it, a shoulder to lean on, someone to listen to, or even just someone to look up to, like that's what I try to model my life after, and live after, or show to other people, is to show other people that, there is a life after diagnosis, there is a life after surgery, and that you can live a normal life. Because that's the number one thing I get all the time now after my surgery is people are like, they don't even notice, or if I tell them, or if there are people who know me for a while, they're like, oh wow, like I can't believe, like you look really good, like, and it's always like a compliment to, like, they can't really believe after reading what they've read that, like, that I look the way I do now and that my life is the way it is now. And truthfully, when I was 18 years old, I didn't believe that either. I wrote all about that, where I was going through it mentally and physically, and I didn't really see a way out, and I didn't think things were any better. So if you're in that mental space, I get it. I've been there, and I don't want to minimize it and say that it doesn't, that you're over exaggerating, because you're not. It's all totally normal. And I think that's something that, a lot of people don't hear nowadays. They just kind of think that they're feeling crazy for having all these totally normal emotions. It's all totally normal. It will be tough, but it does get better. And if anything, I can be proof to you that there is life after diagnosis. So that would be my advice, is that just be patient, stay strong, and things will get better. I can promise that.